The mysterious arrival. The Xeron fleet emerged from the shadow of Neptune, their sleek, silver ships cutting through the darkness of space like silent predators. For centuries, the Xerons had explored the galaxy, cataloging worlds, conquering the weak, and harvesting resources. Earth, a small blue planet on the edge of its star system, had been dismissed millennia ago as insignificant. But now, something had changed. The lead ship, Eris Prime, bristled with alien technology. Inside its command chamber, Captain Xylar stood before a holographic map of Earth, his four eyes narrowing as the data streams flowed across the screen. "Strange," he muttered, his voice echoing in the chamber. "The energy readings are unnatural." His second-in-command, Officer Drin, tilted her head, her bio-implants glowing faintly. "Captain, Earth's species was primitive the last time it was observed. Their technology was limited to combustion engines and chemical warfare. How could they generate this level of power?" Xylar didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured toward the holographic display, magnifying the image of Earth. The planet was teeming with life, its oceans shimmering like liquid sapphire, its land masses pulsating with unidentifiable energy signatures. "Perhaps they've been assisted," Xylar said finally. His tone was laced with suspicion. Drin frowned. "Assisted? By whom?" None of the galactic powers would waste resources on a species this primitive. Xylar's eyes remained fixed on the planet. "That's what we're here to find out." As the Xeron fleet drew closer, their sensors began to pick up strange anomalies. Unusual bursts of electromagnetic energy rippled across space, emanating from Earth's surface. The readings were inconsistent, almost as if the planet itself was alive. "Captain," a technician's voice broke through the tension. "We've intercepted a signal from the planet. It's old, very old, but powerful. It's looping on a frequency we've never encountered before." "Play it," Xylar commanded. The room filled with a low rhythmic hum. It was neither a distress signal nor a standard communication. It was something else entirely, a beacon. The sound was haunting, almost hypnotic, and it sent a chill through the crew. Drin's implants flickered as she analyzed the signal. "This frequency, it's not natural. It's been artificially engineered, but the technology is beyond anything I've seen." Xylar clenched his jaw. A primitive species doesn't create something like this. Either they've advanced at an impossible rate or someone has interfered. The fleet finally entered Earth's orbit, their massive ships casting shadows over the planet's surface. Xylar stared out the viewport, his eyes scanning the planet below. It looked peaceful, serene even, but he knew better than to trust appearances. "Deploy the probes," he ordered. Small, spherical drones shot out from the fleet, descending toward Earth's atmosphere. As they entered the planet's airspace, the anomalies grew stronger. The drones transmitted live feeds back to the Eris Prime, showing images of sprawling cities, towering structures, and fleets of sleek, metallic vessels unlike anything the Xerons had ever seen. Drin's voice was barely a whisper. "This isn't possible. These ships, they rival our own." Before Xylar could respond, an alert blared through the command chamber. The holographic map of Earth flared with red markers, indicating multiple energy sources activating across the planet. "What's happening?" Xylar barked. A technician's voice trembled as he reported. "Captain, their fleet. It's powering up. They've detected us." Xylar's eyes widened. "Their fleet? How many ships?" The technician hesitated. "Thousands, sir, and their energy output is higher than ours." The command chamber fell silent. The Xerons were one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They had conquered countless worlds, faced innumerable enemies, and emerged victorious every time. Yet now, as they gazed upon Earth, they were faced with something they had never encountered before, an equal. Xylar's voice was low but firm. "Open a channel to their fleet. I want to speak to whoever is in charge." The technician complied, sending out a universal signal. For a moment, there was no response. Then the holographic display shifted, and a figure appeared, a human. The man wore a sleek uniform adorned with symbols the Xerons couldn't decipher. His eyes were calm but piercing, and his expression carried an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. "This is Admiral Kane of the United Earth Fleet," the human said, his voice steady. "You've entered restricted space. State your intentions, or prepare to be engaged." Xylar felt a chill run through him. This wasn't the response of a primitive species. This was the voice of a predator defending its territory. Drin leaned closer to Xylar, her voice barely audible. "Captain, we should retreat. This is not what we expected." But Xylar shook his head. His pride wouldn't allow it. "No, we're not retreating. We'll uncover their secrets, even if it means war." The holographic image of Admiral Kane flickered, his eyes narrowing, as if he could hear Xylar's thoughts. "You've been warned," Kane said. "The next move is yours." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the command chamber in silence. Xylar straightened, his resolve hardening. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "We're not leaving until we know the truth." As the Xeron ships readied for confrontation, a sense of unease settled over the crew. For the first time in their history, they were about to face an enemy they didn't understand, and perhaps couldn't defeat: humanity's hidden evolution. The Xeron fleet hovered in Earth's orbit, their scanners working tirelessly to decode the strange signals and energy patterns emanating from the planet below. Inside the Eris Prime, Captain Xylar paced the command chamber, his mind racing. Nothing about Earth aligned with their records, what had happened in the 500,000 years since the planet was last observed. "Captain," Officer Drin said, breaking the silence, "we've accessed fragments of their planetary archives. It appears humanity faced near extinction 500,000 years ago." Xylar stopped pacing and turned to face her. "Extinction. Explain." Drin manipulated the holographic interface, bringing up a series of images. They showed a planet ravaged by chaos, violent storms, volcanic eruptions, and a dying atmosphere. According to their records, Earth suffered a catastrophic event. A supervolcanic eruption nearly wiped out their species. For centuries, they lived underground, struggling to survive. Xylar frowned. "And yet they're here now, stronger than ever. How?" Drin's implants flickered as she accessed more data. It appears their survival was driven by a single event: the discovery of a material they call Etherium. It's unlike anything in our databases, an energy source with almost limitless potential. Etherium. Xylar repeated, the word unfamiliar on his tongue. Drin nodded. The archive suggests that this material wasn't of terrestrial origin. It's theorized to have come from a meteor that struck Earth during the extinction event. Humanity discovered it in their darkest hour and used it to rebuild. As the holograms shifted, Xylar saw images of humans experimenting with glowing crystals, their faces lit with determination. They learned to harness its power, Drin continued, not just for survival, but for advancement. Over millennia, they developed technology far beyond their natural progression. They've transformed themselves into something different. Xylar's gaze hardened. Different how? Drin hesitated. It's not just their technology, Captain. The Etherium seems to have affected their biology. Some of them, perhaps their leaders, have enhanced abilities. Faster, stronger, more resilient. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. A species that was once primitive had evolved into something the Xerons hadn't anticipated, something potentially dangerous. Captain, a technician interrupted, his voice tense. We've detected movement from their fleet. They're positioning themselves in a defensive formation. Xylar stepped closer to the viewport, where Earth's ships were now fully visible. They moved with precision, their formations as sharp and deliberate as a predator's strike. These were not the ships of a fledgling race. They were war machines. Drin spoke again, her tone cautious. Captain, if their archives are accurate, they'd been preparing for this moment for centuries. They knew someone would come for them eventually. Xylar's jaw tightened. They've had 500,000 years to prepare, he said. But so have we. Captain, another voice called out. It was the technician, his hands trembling over his console. I've decrypted part of the signal. It's a warning, a message to anyone who approaches Earth. Xylar gestured for him to play it. The room filled with a deep, resonant voice. It wasn't angry or threatening, but it carried an unmistakable weight. This is Earth. To those who come in peace, you are welcome. To those who come as conquerors, leave now or face annihilation. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Even Xylar felt a chill run through him. The Xerons had faced resistance before, but this felt different. What do we do, Captain? Drin asked. Xylar's response was immediate. We don't back down. Deploy the ground probes. I want to see what's happening on the surface. Moments later, the probes were launched, descending rapidly through Earth's atmosphere. As they neared the ground, the screens aboard the Ares Prime lit up with live feeds. What they showed was nothing short of extraordinary. The first probe landed in what appeared to be a military base. Towering structures pulsed with aetherium energy, their designs sleek and efficient. Human soldiers moved in perfect coordination, their uniforms adorned with glowing insignias. The second probe found itself in a city, a bustling metropolis filled with advanced technology. Hovering vehicles zipped through the air, and massive holographic displays broadcast news of the Xeron fleet's arrival. The third probe, however, never made it. As it approached its target, a bright beam of energy shot up from the surface, obliterating it in an instant. Drin's implants flared with alarm. Captain, their planetary defenses are active. They're targeting our probes. Xylar clenched his fists. They're testing us, he growled. They want to see how far we're willing to go. Before anyone could respond, a new alert blared through the chamber. The technician's voice was filled with panic. Captain, their fleet is locking weapons on us. Xylar turned back to the viewport. The Earth ships were closing in, their weapons glowing with an eerie blue light. For the first time in his career, Xylar felt the weight of uncertainty. Raise the shields, he commanded, and prepare for battle. The first strike. The Xeron fleet reeled under the impact of Earth's first attack. Brilliant blue beams of energy pierced the void, colliding with the shields of the Ares Prime and its accompanying ships. Inside the command chamber, alarms blared, and a holographic interface flickered with damage reports. Shields holding at 70%, reported Officer Drin, her tone strained. Their weapons are far more advanced than we calculated. Captain Xylar stood rigid, his four eyes fixed on the viewport. Outside, Earth's fleet moved with precision, their ships' sleek designs a stark contrast to the more utilitarian Xeron vessels. They're testing us, Xylar muttered, his voice a mix of frustration and curiosity. They want to see if we'll break. Drin glanced at him. Should we respond, Captain, or retreat? Xylar's pride bristled at the suggestion of retreat. Retreat is not an option. They've shown their hand, and now we'll show ours. He turned to the weapons officer. Target their lid ship. Fire on my command. The weapons officer hesitated. Captain, their fleet is heavily shielded. We'll need to overload their defenses. Then do it. Xylar snapped. I want that ship destroyed. The crew worked quickly, their fingers flying across the consoles. Outside, the Xeron fleet repositioned, their ships forming an aggressive spearhead aimed directly at Earth's fleet. Firing in 3, 2, 1, the weapons officer announced. The Ares Prime unleashed a barrage of plasma missiles, each one glowing with lethal energy. The projectiles streaked toward the lead Earth ship, a massive vessel bristling with aetherium-powered weaponry. For a moment, it seemed the Xerons had the upper hand. But then, something unexpected happened. The Earth ship's shields didn't just absorb the attack, they'd redirected it. The plasma missiles arced back toward the Xeron fleet, detonating with devastating force. The explosion rocked the Eris Prime, and the ship's interior lights flickered as the crew struggled to stabilize. Shields down to 50%. Drin shouted. "They've turned our weapons against us." Siler's fists clenched. This was no ordinary fleet. The humans had mastered technologies that even the Xerons couldn't fully comprehend. "Captain," a technician called out, "we've detected a transmission from the planet. It's coming from a heavily fortified facility near their equator." "Put it through," Xyler ordered. The holographic display shifted, revealing a massive structure surrounded by towering spires of glowing Ethereum. At its center stood a figure, a human clad in a sleek black uniform, their face obscured by a glowing visor. "This is High Commander Elena Vega of the United Earth Fleet," the figure said, their voice calm but commanding. "You've made a grave mistake by underestimating us. Leave now while you still can." Tyler stepped forward, his expression hard. "We do not retreat, Commander Vega. We are the Xerons, rulers of the galaxy. Surrender your secrets, and we may spare your planet." Vega's laughter echoed through the chamber, cold and mocking. "Rulers of the galaxy? Perhaps you were, once, but you've grown complacent. While you've been harvesting worlds, we've been preparing for this moment." Xyler's eyes narrowed. "You've been preparing for war." "Not just war," Vega replied. "We've been preparing for you. The Xeron Empire has long cast its shadow over this galaxy, but your time is over. It's time for the hunted to become the hunters." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Xeron command chamber in stunned silence. Drin turned to Xyler, her voice barely above a whisper. "Captain, they've been waiting for us. This isn't just defense, it's a trap." Xyler's expression darkened. "Then we'll spring it. All ships, focus fire on their fleet. Overload their defenses. Show them what the Xeron Empire is capable of." The Xeron fleet launched a full-scale assault, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that Earth's fleet was more than prepared. Their ships moved with uncanny precision, dodging attacks and countering with devastating strikes. "Captain," a technician shouted, "we're taking heavy losses. If this continues..." Xyler slammed his fist against the console. "Enough. Deploy the Arc Spire." Drin's eyes widened. "The Arc Spire? Captain, that weapon hasn't been tested. If it malfunctions..." "It won't," Xyler interrupted. "And if it does, then we'll take them down with us." The command was given, and a massive structure began to emerge from the rear of the Xeron fleet. The Arc Spire, a towering weapon of unimaginable power, slowly powered up, its core glowing with a blinding white light. Inside the Eris Prime, the tension was palpable. The crew worked frantically, knowing that failure was not an option. "Target locked," the weapons officer reported. Xyler's gaze hardened. "Fire." The Arc Spire unleashed a beam of pure energy, cutting through the void like a blade. It was a weapon designed to obliterate entire planets, and its power was unmatched. But as the beam streaked toward Earth's fleet, something extraordinary happened. The Earth ships formed a defensive grid, their Aetherium-powered shields glowing brightly. The beam struck the grid, and for a moment, it seemed as though the humans would be overwhelmed. Then, the grid absorbed the energy, redirecting it back toward the Xeron fleet. The beam tore through the ranks of Xeron ships, leaving destruction in its wake. "Impossible," Xyler whispered, his confidence finally faltering. Earth's ultimate weapon. The Xeron fleet was in shambles. The redirected blast from the Arc Spire had torn through their formation, leaving a trail of destruction that even the Xerons hadn't anticipated. Inside the Eris Prime, the command chamber was in chaos. Technicians scrambled to regain control, while alarms blared relentlessly. "Shields down to 20%. Officer Drin reported, her voice strained. "We've lost 4 cruisers and 2 battle carriers." Captain Sylar gritted his teeth, his pride now mingling with desperation. The battle had taken a turn he hadn't foreseen, and the humans were proving to be a far greater threat than he'd ever imagined. Before he could issue his next command, the holographic display lit up with a new energy reading. It was massive, unlike anything the Xerons had ever encountered. A hush fell over the chamber as the source of the reading emerged from Earth's shadow. The vessel was colossal, dwarfing even the Eris Prime. Its sleek obsidian black hull was adorned with glowing veins of blue aetherium energy, and its very presence seemed to distort the space around it. The ship moved with an eerie grace, as if it were alive. "Captain," a technician said, his voice trembling. That ship is generating more power than our entire fleet combined." Xylar stared at the vessel, a knot of unease forming in his chest. "What is that?" he demanded. Drin's implants flickered as she accessed the ship's data. "It's their flagship. They call it the Aetherian Ascendant. According to their archives, it's powered by a massive aetherium core, one that's been refined for over 1,000 years. Xylar's fists clenched. A single ship can't take on an entire fleet, no matter how advanced it is. Drin hesitated. "Captain, that's not just a ship. It's a weapon. A planetary-class weapon." The Aetherian Ascendant stopped just beyond the wreckage of the Xeron fleet, its massive hull glowing as energy began to build within its core. From the surface of the ship, smaller vessels detached, each one moving with precise coordination to form a defensive barrier around their flagship. A transmission came through, filling the chamber with the calm yet commanding voice of High Commander Elena Vega. "Xeron fleet, this is your final warning. Leave now or face annihilation." Xylar's pride flared at the ultimatum. "Empty threats," he growled. "She thinks one ship can turn the tide of this battle. We'll destroy it like the rest." Drin's gaze was grim. "Captain, if that ship fires its weapon, it could obliterate us all. We need to consider retreat." "Retreat?" Sylar snapped. "We are the Xeron Empire. We do not retreat." Drin opened her mouth to argue, but before she could speak, the Aetherian Ascendant made its move. The ship's energy output spiked, and from its core, a beam of concentrated aetherium energy erupted. The beam didn't simply destroy, it disintegrated. Entire Xeron ships were reduced to particles in an instant, their shields offering no resistance. The beam carved through the fleet with terrifying precision, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. Inside the Eris Prime, the crew was paralyzed by the sight. The Xerons had faced powerful enemies before, but this was unlike anything they'd ever encountered. "Captain," Drin said softly, her voice breaking the silence, "we can't win this. If we don't leave now, there won't be a fleet left to retreat." Xylar stared at the viewport, his expression a mix of rage and disbelief. For the first time in his life, he felt truly outmatched. Another transmission came through, this time accompanied by the image of High Commander Vega. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with intensity. "This is not a negotiation," she said. "We've spent centuries preparing for this day, preparing for you. Leave now or be destroyed." Sylar's pride warred with his survival instincts. He could feel the eyes of his crew on him, waiting for his decision. Drin stepped closer, her voice low. "Captain, the fleet is at its limit. If we stay, we die. But if we retreat, we live to fight another day." The silence in the chamber was deafening as Sylar wrestled with the choice. Finally, he turned to his crew. "All ships," he said, his voice heavy. "Prepare for retreat. We'll regroup and return stronger." The Xerons began their retreat, their ships limping away from Earth's orbit. The humans didn't pursue. They didn't need to. The message was clear. Earth was no longer the vulnerable world it had once been. As the Xeron fleet disappeared into the void, High Commander Vega watched from the bridge of the Aetherian Ascendant. "They'll be back," one of her officers said. Vega nodded. "I know, and we'll be ready." The aftermath of battle. The Earth's defense forces erupted into cheers as the Xeron fleet retreated beyond the edges of the solar system. Across the globe, humanity watched in stunned silence as news of their victory spread like wildfire. The unthinkable had happened. Earth had stood its ground against the mightiest empire in the galaxy. And won. Aboard the Aetherian Ascendant, High Commander Elena Vega surveyed the remains of the battle. The wreckage of Xeron ships floated aimlessly in orbit, a grim reminder of the cost of war. Her officers were subdued, their initial relief tempered by the weight of what they had just witnessed. "Status report," Vega said, her voice cutting through the quiet. "Minor damage to our outer defenses," one officer replied. "No casualties on our side." Vega nodded, though her mind was far from at ease. "And the Xerons? They've retreated to the outer rim," another officer reported. "Scanners show they're regrouping, likely assessing the damage to their fleet." Vega's expression hardened. She knew the Xerons well enough to understand this wasn't the end. They weren't the type to accept defeat quietly. "Commander," said a voice from the back of the room. It was Dr. Alexis Harlow, one of the scientists who had overseen the development of the Aetherian Ascendant. "We need to talk." Vega gestured for her to follow, and the two retreated to the war room, a secure chamber deep within the ship. "What is it?" Vega asked once the door sealed behind them. Dr. Harlow looked uneasy. "The Aetherium core," she began. "The energy output during the battle was higher than we've ever tested. It held, but there are cracks in the system. If we push it that hard again without repairs, it could destabilize." Vega's stomach sank. The Aetherian Ascendant was humanity's greatest weapon, their last line of defense. If it failed, Earth would have nothing to stand against the Xerons. "How long do we have?" Vega asked. "A few weeks, maybe less," Harlow replied. "But that's assuming the Xerons give us that much time. We need to start repairs immediately." Vega nodded, her mind racing. "Do it. Prioritize the core's stability above all else. We'll buy as much time as we can." Harlow hesitated. "There's something else, Commander." "What?" Harlow lowered her voice. "During the battle, the Xerons deployed reconnaissance probes. They were scanning our planetary defenses, but they also gathered data on the Aetherium core. If they're able to analyze it, they'll find a way to counter it," Vega finished grimly. Harlow nodded. "Exactly. And if they do, the next battle won't be like this one. They'll come prepared." Vega leaned against the war room table, her mind a storm of thoughts. Humanity's triumph had been hard-earned, but it had also revealed their greatest weapon. The Xerons wouldn't make the same mistakes twice. "We need a contingency," Vega said after a long pause. "If the Aetherian Ascendant falls, we can't let the Xerons take the core. We'll need to destroy it." Harlow's eyes widened. "Destroy it? Commander, that core is the backbone of our entire fleet. Without it, Earth's defenses. Without it, the Xerons win," Vega interrupted. "We have no choice." Harlow reluctantly nodded, the weight of the decision settling over her. "I'll make the preparations." As Harlow left the war room, Vega stared at the holographic display of Earth, its blue and green surface glimmering against the blackness of space. She thought of the generations of humans who had fought, struggled, and survived to bring their species to this point. They had bought time, but time was fleeting. **** Meanwhile, aboard the Xeron flagship, the Eris Prime, Captain Xylar sat at the center of the command chamber, his eyes fixed on a hologram of the Earth fleet. The human ships moved with an elegance and power that both infuriated and intrigued him. "Captain," Officer Drin said, stepping forward, "our analysts have begun deciphering the data from the probes. It seems the humans' power comes from a single source, an energy core unlike anything we've seen before." Xylar's lips curled into a thin smile. "Their strength is also their weakness," he said. "If we can disrupt that core, their defenses will crumble." Drin hesitated. "The core is heavily protected, and even if we find a way to neutralize it, they'll see us coming." Xyler's smile widened. Then we won't go for the core directly. We'll exploit their greatest flaw, emotions. They value life above all else. Use that against them. Drin frowned. What do you mean? Earth is just one planet, Xyler said, leaning back in his chair. But their colonies, their outposts, they're scattered across the galaxy. We'll strike where they least expect it. And when they rush to defend their people, their defenses will falter. Drin's eyes widened as she grasped the plan. Divide and conquer. Precisely, Xyler said. The humans think they've won. Let's show them how wrong they are. Shadows of war. The victory celebrations on Earth were short-lived. High Commander Elena Vega stood in the war room of the Aetherian Ascendant, her expression grim as she studied the reports streaming in from the outer colonies. Each one painted a dire picture. Xeron ships had begun striking human outposts across the galaxy, targeting supply lines, research facilities, and civilian settlements. They're testing us, Vega said, her voice cold. They want to spread our forces thin, make us vulnerable. Dr. Alexis Harlow stood beside her, her brow furrowed. If they keep this up, we'll be forced to divide our fleet just to protect the colonies. And if we do that, they'll come for Earth, Vega finished. The tension in the room was palpable. The Xerons had shifted tactics, turning their focus away from direct confrontation. Instead, they were waging the war of attrition, chipping away at humanity's defenses, while forcing them to make impossible choices. A young officer entered the room, his face pale. Commander, we've just received a distress signal from Colony Theta 9. A Xeron fleet has entered the system. Vega's jaw tightened. Theta 9 was one of humanity's most remote colonies, a small mining outpost with little in the way of defenses. How long do they have? Vega asked. 2 hours, at most, the officer replied. Vega turned to her second-in-command, Admiral Marcus Chen. How soon can we deploy reinforcements? Chen shook his head. The nearest fleet is 4 hours away. They won't make it in time. The room fell silent as the weight of the situation settled over them. Vega's mind raced, searching for a solution. The Aetherian Ascendant was powerful, but it couldn't be everywhere at once. Prepare a jump, she said finally. Chen frowned. Commander, if we leave Earth unguarded. Vega raised a hand to silence him. I'm not abandoning Earth. But if we let the Xerons destroy Theta 9 without a fight, it'll send a message to the rest of the galaxy that we can't protect our own. Chen hesitated, then nodded. Understood. As the Aetherian Ascendant prepared for its jump, Vega addressed the crew over the intercom. This is High Commander Vega. The Xerons think they can break us by attacking our colonies, by preying on the vulnerable. But they underestimate us. We are humanity, and we do not abandon our own. Meanwhile, on Colony Theta 9, the skies above the small mining outpost were filled with the hum of Xeron warships. The colony's defenses, a handful of outdated cannons, and a single shield generator, were woefully inadequate against the invading force. Governor Elise Morin stood in the colony's command center, her heart pounding as she watched the Xeron ships descend. What's the status of the shield? She demanded. Still holding, a technician replied, but it won't last long. The Xerons are hammering us with focused energy blasts. Morin clenched her fists. The colony's civilians were huddled in underground shelters, but if the shield failed, there would be no escape. Suddenly, the room's main console lit up with an incoming transmission. The holographic display flickered, and the face of a Xeron officer appeared. His features were sharp and predatory, his eyes glinting with malice. This is Commander Reth of the Xeron fleet, the alien said, his voice dripping with condescension. Surrender your colony, and we may spare a handful of your people. Morin glared at the hologram. We won't surrender. You'll have to come down here and take it. Reth's smile widened. Oh, we intend to. The transmission cut off, and the command center erupted into activity as the Xerons began a ground assault. Dropships descended from the sky. unleashing squads of armored xeron soldiers onto the surface. The colony's militia fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Morin refused to abandon her post, even as the walls shook from the impact of xeron explosives. "Keep the shield operational for as long as possible," she ordered. "We just need to hold out until reinforcements arrive." Back aboard the Etherian Ascendant. "We're approaching Theta 9, Admiral Chen reported. Vega stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the display of the colony under siege. The Xeron fleet loomed over the small planet, their ships bombarding the surface with relentless fire. "Prepare all weapons," Vega ordered. "Target their command ship. I want them to know we're here." The Etherian Ascendant exited hyperspace with a burst of light, its sleek form cutting through the darkness. The ship's weapons came online, firing precision strikes at the Xeron fleet. The sudden attack caught the Xerons off guard, and several of their ships were destroyed before they could mount a defense. On the surface, the tide began to turn as Earth's forces made their presence known. The militia, emboldened by the sight of their reinforcements, launched a counterattack, driving the Xeron soldiers back. "Commander," Chen said, "we've disabled their flagship. The remaining ships are retreating." Vega nodded. "Good, but this is far from over." The final stand. The Xerons had made good on their threat. One by one, humanity's outer colonies fell under relentless assault. Earth's fleet, despite its victories, had been stretched thin, forced to cover too many battlefronts at once. Now the fight had come to humanity's homeworld. High Commander Elena Vega stood aboard the Etherian Ascendant, its sleek hull orbiting Earth like a silent guardian. Below, the planet glowed softly in the darkness of space, a fragile jewel under threat. Vega's face was grim as she studied the Xeron fleet amassing on the edge of the solar system. "They're not holding back this time," Admiral Marcus Chen said, standing beside her. "That's their entire armada." The holographic display in front of them showed a terrifying sight. Thousands of Xeron warships, each bristling with weapons, moving in coordinated precision. At the center of the fleet loomed a massive vessel unlike any they had seen before, a ship so large it dwarfed even the Etherian Ascendant. Its dark, jagged hull pulsed with an ominous red glow. "What is that?" Vega asked, her voice steady despite the dread creeping into her chest. Dr. Alexis Harlow, hurriedly analyzing the data, shook her head. "It's a supercarrier, a mobile fortress. They've weaponized their entire fleet to protect it. If it gets within range, its main cannon could obliterate Earth's surface in one shot." Vega's jaw tightened. The Xerons had escalated beyond skirmishes and raids. This was their endgame. Earth's last line of defense. All across Earth's orbit, human ships took their positions, forming a defensive wall. Though smaller and fewer in number than the Xeron fleet, they bristled with the hard-earned technological advancements humanity had built over centuries. The humans weren't fighting just for survival. They were fighting for everything they had built, everything they loved. In the civilian bunkers deep underground, families huddled together, watching the unfolding battle on flickering screens. Children clutched their parents' hands as news anchors tried to remain calm, though fear was evident in their voices. In the skies above, the first wave of Xeron ships surged forward, their sleek forms slicing through the void. Human defenses opened fire, filling the blackness with streaks of light and fiery explosions. A bold plan. Back aboard the Etherian Ascendant, Vega called an emergency meeting with her senior officers. The tension in the room was palpable. "We can't fight them ship to ship," Chen said bluntly. "They'll overwhelm us." Vega nodded. "Agreed, which is why we're going to cut the head off the snake." She pointed to the holographic display, highlighting the Xeron supercarrier. "That ship is the key. Without it, their fleet loses cohesion. We take it out, and the rest will fall apart." Harlow frowned. "Their supercarrier is shielded by their entire armada. Even if we get past the outer defenses, we don't have enough firepower to destroy it outright." "That's why we're going to use the Etherium core," Vega said, her voice steady. A stunned silence fell over the room. "You're talking about a controlled detonation," Harlow said finally. "Commander, the core isn't just the heart of this ship. It's the heart of our fleet. If we lose it..." Vega met her gaze. "If we don't, Earth is lost." The final battle. The Etherian Ascendant led a daring charge, its weapons blazing as it cut a path through the Xeron fleet. Smaller Earth ships followed in its wake, drawing fire and creating openings in the Xeron formation. Inside the Etherian Ascendant, the atmosphere was tense but focused. Every crew member knew what was at stake. "Approaching the supercarrier," Chen reported. "Their defenses are intensifying." "Hold course," Vega ordered. The Etherian Ascendant took hit after hit, its shields flickering under the strain. But the ship pressed on, its Aetherium-powered weapons carving through the enemy's lines. Finally, they reached the supercarrier. The massive ship loomed before them, its hull bristling with cannons. "Activate the core," Vega commanded. Harlow hesitated. "Commander, do it." The Etherium core began to pulse, its energy building to a critical level. The ship trembled as the power surged through its systems. "Core is destabilizing," Harlow reported. "We have 3 minutes before detonation." Vega nodded. "Prepare for evacuation." Escape pods launched from the Etherian Ascendant, carrying its crew to safety. Vega remained on the bridge, her hands gripping the controls as she guided the ship directly into the heart of the supercarrier. A hero's sacrifice. The Xerons realized too late what was happening. The Etherian Ascendant collided with the supercarrier, the destabilized core unleashing a massive explosion. The shockwave tore through the Xeron fleet, destroying ships in its path and sending the survivors into disarray. On Earth, the people watched in stunned silence as the bright flash of the explosion lit up the night sky. The battle was over. Humanity had won, but at a great cost. Epilogue. In the aftermath, Earth mourned the loss of the Etherian Ascendant and those who had sacrificed their lives to protect the planet. Statues were erected in Vega's honor, her name etched into the annals of history as a symbol of courage and leadership. But the war was not forgotten. Humanity knew the Xerons would return, perhaps stronger than before. For now, though, Earth stood united, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had proven one thing to the galaxy: humanity would never surrender.